Welcome to the Awakening Podcast. You can find all our episodes on awakeningpodcast.org. My guest today is going to be discussing the power of paper, the affidavit process. Please welcome Kirk Beck.
Good morning, Roy.
Thank you very much. I know it's very early for you, and I'm looking forward to this, but I'd like to, I didn't read out details of it, but let people know, first of all, who's Kirk?
Kirk's a educator. I've been teaching mathematics and a little bit of civics for over 40 years. And I would often say, I can't wait till the day when I'm teaching something that's really important. And that's what I think what we're doing right here. This is something that Americans especially need to know, that there's no reason why we allow our government to run rampant. It's something that we can do. And I've been married for 50 years, and I have 3 children. I've lived primarily I grew up in South Dakota, did some teaching in Colorado, been in California for about 37 years. So I know what state oppressive can be like. This is a very regulated state, and it makes the use of the affidavit process even more important. 75 years old, and I'm ready to go.
Brilliant. So I know that for you to get into the affidavit process, something must have happened in your life, some court case or something, to make you go, hey, there's something going on here. So I'd love to know what exactly stirred that in you.
This was 50 years ago. 2:00 in the morning, I'm driving with my wife, and 2:00 in the morning, I get the red light comes on, the cop's stopping me. What? A rolling stop. At 2:00 in the morning, you're going to give me a ticket for a rolling stop? Yep. Well, I'd never been in court before, but I didn't think this was right. So I started my process of learning, and rolling stops and Kirk Beck have been synonymous. That's all I get. I don't get speeding tickets. I don't get reckless driving. I don't do DUI ever because I don't drink that much at all. But I had these encounters with the police, and every time I would go to court, I would always bring up some topic because I thought, this just doesn't seem right. Plus, on top of it, where's the money going? The money's going to the government. So the government's tagging me for something that I've done, haven't hurt anybody. And it just seemed like another form of taxation. So I decided I'm going to press in. And every time I got one of these, and I didn't get that many of them, about 6 of them in my lifetime, I would continue to try and find a method that would be successful. And that just kept going and going. And then out here in California, about 7 years ago, I was on a jury pool, and I met the people who taught me the affidavit process. And I always say, if it weren't for Margie and Jack Flynn, who have been doing this successfully for over 6 decades, I wouldn't be here now. I'd still be wondering, it doesn't seem right, but I don't quite understand how to deal with it. But the story of that jury was the critical point of recognizing there is a solution. And I can go into that jury pool a little more detail, but that's how I met Jack and Margie Flynn. And that's where the whole affidavit process began in my life. And since that time, I count myself personally 5 victories. So when Margie and Jack say over the course of 6 decades, they have over 10,000 victories, I believe them, because it works. Now, it works primarily for a defensive mechanism. I've wanted to try to turn it around, and I've become a plaintiff lately, using the affidavit process and pulling people into court. And right now, we're looking at pulling the Attorney General for the state of California into Small Claims Court. Because in Small Claims Court, you can't have an attorney. It's just you and the court. So I've been in the Small Claims Court 2 times, and every time I go, I learn. I learn law by doing law. I went to law school for a while, but I didn't want to learn stare decisis. I wanted to learn common law. I wanted to learn common sense. It just seemed to me like going to court should be rather straightforward. Did I hurt somebody? No. Then why am I here? Is this just another avenue for taxing me and taxing all my friends and fellow citizens? And I pretty much concluded that's what positive law is. Positive law is, it's not where you're in court because you hurt somebody. You're in court because you didn't do something. You didn't do something that the state wants you to do. And if you don't do it, then they're going to tax you. You're going to call it a fine, but it's still a tax.
Right.
So it started with rolling stops, and it's gone way beyond rolling stops.
Have you kind of gone down the common law, merchant law, admiral law to kind of go around this, or did you just kind of get the information for them and go, this is the way it is?
Well, that's a better process. I knew that the critical issue was jurisdiction when you go into the courtroom. You must deal with the jurisdictional issue if you're going to have any success at all. But I found that I can do that through paper. I don't have to go into the courtroom and make my case. If I'm a plaintiff, I'm going to have to step up my game. But the first time I used this was rolling stop. And I sent the deputy sheriff a letter because my mentors told me, hey, treat the person the way you'd want to be treated. Always treat government officials with respect. Don't argue with them. I just sent them a letter and I explained to them what, in the case of traffic, what the police officer did wrong. I always said it with return request receipt. And so they have to sign for it. I'm sure they don't get many of those. But they didn't respond to it. The deputy didn't respond to it. So then I just followed it up with the affidavit. And he didn't respond to that either. But when I went to court, I went with a witness. Never go to court without a witness. And I didn't have to say anything. The deputy sheriff walked in. He saw me. He gave the bailiff a piece of paper. The paper was given to the judge. And literally 2 minutes later, the judge said, Mr. Beck, your case has been dropped. You may leave. So as a defendant, I left. After at least 6 other occasions I've been in court, that was the first time I ever won. And I didn't have to say a word. The paper did it all.
It was like the jurisdiction, because sometimes, claiming that, because I've even heard with the trickery of words, like a summons, people think I have to go to court. And there's a trickery. You don't have that. But with me, what I've done is I used I'm the living soul. You're looking for the corporate entity of the all capitals, and that worked. They backed off. So there's different ways of actually doing these things. But sometimes I know people make the mistake. They go into court and they go, I demand this, and they start kind of throwing things that they've heard and they dig a hole for themselves. As I think the most important thing is, you said, you show respect. Unless you're disrespected yourself, then you throw it back at them. But it's I think a lot of the time you don't even have to go into the courtroom.
All right. I found myself in court on a misdemeanor because I got another rolling stop ticket and I refused to pay it. Well, that was not a wise thing to do. I do a lot of stupid things along the way, but I never hurt anybody. That's the key thing. I never hurt anybody. So I found myself in the courtroom on a misdemeanor, suspended license, driving on one. And I objected to something that the DA said. And the judge said, Mr. Beck, you have to explain that to me. So I began to explain it. And this guy, he didn't have to do this. But I think he might have been slightly impressed with what I was saying because, wait, so Mr. Beck, stop. I appreciate what you're saying, but you have to understand something. That's not why we're here today. You should have brought that up in a pre-trial motion. I'll say it again, pre-trial motion. If you're going to bring the Constitution in, you're going to bring in any of these issues of jurisdiction, you have to bring it in properly in a pre-trial motion. So the judge told me what to do. And that's what I've done. Now, sometimes it's a chess game. You play the game and sometimes you lose, but I never lose as long as I learn. I took Best Buy to court. This is the first time I tried being a plaintiff. They wanted me to wear a mask and go into their store. I said, I don't have to wear a mask to come to your store. It's a public place. He said, well, we have a mandate. You have. Actually, they said, we have a law. To which I said, no, it's a mandate. And mandates aren't laws. Statutes aren't even laws unless they're constitutional. And he was very polite, but he wouldn't let me in the store. So I did the affidavit process with Best Buy, and they had to show up. Some people say, well, did you win? Well, they had to show up. That in itself was a win for me. But the commissioner didn't understand. I tried to bring in a pretrial motion, and I never heard back. And when I got in and I started making my point, she ran over me. To which I learned, okay, if you're not going to deal with pretrial motion in the proper way, that means I'm going to have to come into your courtroom a couple days in advance and make sure that we deal with it. You can't put me off again. I learned my lesson. And that's what my process of going to court is, that I invariably learn something. I usually learn that doesn't work. But now I'm learning things that do work. And it's a very enlightening and quite liberating experience to be able to go into the courtroom and know that you can win.
Yeah, I've had over 100 court cases, so I know what it's like. I mean, the first, I suppose, 50 or more is be terrified, but you get to the stage where you kind of understand things a lot better, and you know what way to do things. Did you, because with a lot of my research and different things, because sometimes it's the language that they're using, and there's even in the letters that's been written, there's so much trickery out there, unfortunately. It's just trying to understand what game they're playing. Is it chess or checkers? What are playing? But you've got Blacklaw's Dictionary Boulevard. Do you ever question what language they're using if they're coming after you in a letter and they want you to be going to a court?
Our affidavit simply spells out to them their responsibility to answer. Can't dodge the bullet. You have to answer. You wanted the job. You're a legislator, someone who administrates the law, whether you're one who interprets the law. You got the job. Here's your responsibility. Answer. Then the body of the affidavit, which changes with every circumstance, explains exactly the law as we see it. The final paragraph simply says, hey, you have 30 days to rebut. And here comes the key word. Otherwise, everything in the affidavit can be used against you in any court in America. They're certainly not used to those words. because my affidavit isn't to an agency. My affidavit is to a person in charge of the agency. That's the person who's being called out. In 2003, I was back in South Dakota to visit my mother, and I got another traffic situation. But I was scheduled to fly out of the city before the court date. I'm not going to sit around and miss my flight or have to change my flight plans because of this minor technicality, which again, I didn't hurt anybody. So I didn't show up for court. About 10 years, 15 years later, I went to purchase a gun, and there was a bench warrant for me from South Dakota. Oh, okay. So now I didn't know what to do about it. So for 4 years, I didn't do anything. And then I finally came up with the process, the affidavit process. I sent an affidavit to the presiding judge in the county. He did nothing. He did not respond. Here's another critical part of the process. I put the affidavit into a letter with another affidavit, but this one was directed to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the state of South Dakota. And 3 weeks later, the bench warrant was gone. Because the points of law that I brought up in the body can't be refuted if they're based upon the Constitution, evidence, facts, and the truth. If it's based upon all that, there's no way they can rebut it. And attorneys are very good. They're pretty smart guys about they don't want to sign an affidavit that has to be notarized because that puts them in jeopardy. So they don't respond. Marty and Jack have done thousands of these. And we've never had an attorney respond with an affidavit. They might respond with a letter, but not an affidavit. And our affidavit trumps any letter. It's a court official that specified this to be true based upon my oath. And the only way they can rebut that is with another one. And they don't do it.
I had a situation in Ireland. I was in the High Court that basically sold my properties illegally. It was during the crash. And they had sent an affidavit to me and they had all these different points. And it was all lies. I mean, everything that was written. So then I didn't even know what an affidavit was, to be honest, when I got this. So I went into panic stage and I realized, okay, I have to do this. And there was an organization that helped me to do it. So I created my affidavit responding to their ones and with my points. And I mean, I think you said keep it simple, and I should have probably done that, but I had like 40 odd points. And I ended up going, like, first of all, you go into the High Court to decide whether it's going to be a case or not. And they decided with mine, yes. And it's a weird situation because you have like 150 people there. The judge doesn't even know what's going on. He's just opening the file and go, oh yeah. And I had 8 times I had to go back to the High Court, always with different judges. And like sometimes they were kind of attacking me, but near the end I managed to kind of wing it. I was fighting barristers, which are the high level, attorneys. And they were the trickery that they were doing all the time. One judge said, why have you not responded to his affidavit? Because I had him on fraud. I had proof that they were fraudulent in everything they've done. So they never responded to my affidavit. One judge said, why have you not responded? I awarded him €1,400 for his travelling because I'm living in Poland and I had to go back to Ireland. And you better get it to him by the next case or there'll be serious consequences. I was convinced I'm going to win this. This is good. I went back, different judge. I mean, I know later the corruption with all the judges and the banks, that there was, like, I was being compromised. But they never responded to my affidavit and I lost the case, unfortunately. And I was going to go to the High Court. I was going to go to European Court, but I'd have to appeal. And if I appealed, it opened it up to be, I ended up winning on on interest and on penalties, so it wasn't that bad. But if I and I didn't have the bank fees, like their barrister, which could have been about 200 grand, and I would have to appeal it, but I could lose. So it was something like 68 grand versus maybe 500,000, and I wasn't willing to take that risk. So I couldn't take it to the European Court, because in reality they should respond to your affidavit, because that's my. But I think what you said, I don't think I'll have to double check it. You have to respond within a certain time. I don't think I had that at it. So I think what you mentioned about that little piece at the end, it's considered, is gold.
Absolutely. There's rules, and I've learned recently that attorneys, at least in America, they don't really know the law, but they know the rules. And we don't know the rules, and they assume that's how they're going to win most of the time. But the rules aren't that difficult. You just need to learn them. And I didn't go to law school. Like I said, I just go to court. And every time I go to court, I learn. And what I'm trying to put together here in California is, hey, I'm trying to get 30 people to do what I'm doing regarding our Attorney General. And then we will file somewhat like we'll come under one name. I'll call it Remedy at Law Riverside, and we'll sue the Attorney General in Small Claims Court in Riverside, because in California, you have a lot of latitude to sue for discrimination. What's more discriminatory than somebody who's violating the constitutional rights of the people under common law? I've got to bring up this point that I made with a police officer. This guy was a real hardened cop. He had a real edge. I was trying to explain to him what common law is, and I said, you're walking down the street and you see two men mugging a woman across the street. What would you do? Now, I've played this out with other people, and most people would say, well, I'm going to get involved. I'm going to call the cops, or I'm going to go across the street. But the police officer I was talking with said, based upon what I know about the law, I would just keep walking. Well, I was prepared for him. I said, let me change the scenario just a bit. The woman across the street is your own mother. Now what are you going to do? And of course, everything changes now because it's his mother. I said, that's common law. And that's why they hate common law. Because in common law, I have standing. In America, we hear us all the time, we don't have standing. You haven't been specifically hurt, so you don't have standing. That's true. In statutory jurisdiction, that's why I like to clump all these other jurisdictions. I just call it statutory jurisdiction because that's what they call it here. If you ask them what jurisdiction is, there's no such statutory jurisdiction. There's no such thing as statutory jurisdiction, but they made it up. Okay. Under the statutory jurisdiction, I don't have standing. But under common law, I do. So the whole thing is, our battle is common law. That's why, I'm going to try to get 30 people to go after the Attorney General, and we'll probably learn something by doing that. But my ultimate goal is working with my sheriff, who is a pretty darn good sheriff, and our DA, who's a pretty darn good DA, but they're not used to what I'm talking about, but they're decent human beings who are trying to figure out how the system works also. I want to get a list of all the judges in our county, and I want to send them an affidavit, not from me, not from one guy, but from an organization. I want to spell out to them the difference between common law jurisdiction and statutory jurisdiction. So when we go to court, you've already been served. We gave you an affidavit 6 months ago or 6 years ago. So you know what we're talking about. That's why we're here today in a pretrial motion. We're not going to go into your courtroom under statutory jurisdiction. We're going to go in under common law. And common law is common sense. Did I hurt anybody? No. Then I'm moving for dismissal.
I always say that to people, who's the injured party? You know, you're basically fighting a corporation as an additional tax is the way it's done. So if we go for the affidavit, so do you, in the States, do you have to get it notarized, or do you just bring it to the government to lodge it into the courts?
It must be notarized. We can play paper trail back and forth, but when I hit them with an affidavit, they never come back with one. Now, you said earlier you got an affidavit from them. Well, then one specific person did that. All the paper I get from the government never has one specific person's name. It's always, it might look very official, might have to sign for it, but there's no person personally responsible for its content. When for instance, I believe very strongly in my right to travel. I know what the definitions of driving. Driving is commerce. Traveling is just personal movement in your automobile. Driving is moving around in a motor vehicle. You know, everything's got specific definitions. So my potential problem is with the Department of Motor Vehicles, the sheriff, the police chief, and the highway patrol. These are my 4 levels of government contact that might have difficulty with me not wanting to register my car. So I send an affidavit to the CHOP guy at the Department of Motor Vehicles. He sent a letter back. I think it was signed, but it wasn't an affidavit. Just basically saying, you're stupid. We're not going to listen to your arguments anymore. Don't send us any more letter. I never sent you a letter. I sent you an affidavit. You didn't respond to it. So I put the affidavit in an envelope with another affidavit to my sheriff and sent that to my sheriff. I put the affidavit in another envelope with an affidavit to the police chief. I sent that one off. I did one to the highway patrol. So in order for me to do what I think is proper, I set out 4 affidavits, because the first step in due process is notification. I have a lot of patriot friends, and they think they can do this and that, and they'll talk about it. I said, well, have you notified your possible opponent? Well, no, I have a right. Yeah, I know you have a right. But you also have a responsibility, not just right. You have a responsibility to notify your adversary. You would expect that. Wouldn't you want that? Treat your enemies the way you want to be treated. It's a biblical responsibility. So interestingly, within a space of about, I would say, no more than 2 months, after I did all of this, I was sitting out in front of a house waiting for my wife to return from a piano lesson, and kind of dozing, and all of a sudden, knocking on the window was a police officer from the city. And I rolled the window down, and she said, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm waiting for my wife. She's up there giving a piano lesson. What's your wife's name? Well, my wife's name's Elizabeth. And asked me some more questions. Finally said, I need to see your driver's license. Well, I use a driver's license not because I drive, but because it's a nice form of ID. You want to see my ID? Oh, here you go. So she went back to her car. She ran my plates and my ID. My registration, my tags on my car are 16 to 18 months overdue. She came back. She gave me my ID back, and she said, "Have a nice day." She just walked away. Well, I've learned one thing. When I was in court and the judge told me I could leave because my case has been dropped, the judge didn't tell me why. When you win, they will never tell you why. They'll just let you go. A couple weeks later, I was traveling down this road and I realized, wow, wait a minute. I shouldn't be in the left turn lane. I should be way over there in the right turn lane. So I put my blinker on and I was going to go through, as I'm basically at a stoplight. And I look in my rear view mirror. Oh, no, there's a sheriff or a deputy coming. So I'm going to stay right here. I'll put a blinker on the left and I'll just do it. I don't want to do that kind of maneuver in front of a law enforcement agent. Well, he didn't go straight. He got right behind me. And we're both sitting there at the light. And I'm reckoning, well, he has more than enough time now to run my plates. Well, I took a left, went down the road. I said, here's a very unimportant street. I'll just turn here, take a left. And he came right behind me. I figured, okay, light's going to go on pretty soon. He went a couple more blocks. He just stopped and turned around and went away. He ran my plate. This is what I'm thinking. He ran my plates. He recognized there's something in the computer that says, don't stop, don't cite, don't impound. Those are the kind of instructions I like to have pertinent to my run on their computer. So I drove away. I had another one about 2 weeks later with the Highway Patrol. All three of them had ample time to stop me, and they just let me go. Because I notify my adversary. It's really critical that you, when you learn the rules, you play the rules perfectly. There's no reason to have trouble with a police officer. I don't do anything for one thing, I don't speed. I don't drink, so I never have to worry about being a DUI. So I don't do anything stupid in front of a police officer. But that's the way I've been for my whole life. I mean, I've been traveling in my car for many, many, many years, and I've only had one speeding ticket, and that was back in Montana when the speed limit was 55 for a few years because of the oil prices. I think I was going 60 in a 55. Well, I'm a very good traveler. I don't cause trouble.
There's a friend of mine in the UK, because like this is kind of an international thing. You have to register your car, and you don't really own your car. They own the car because the registration goes with them. And if you start looking at this, they've got all the documentation from the car dealership when you buy a new car. I'm not sure it's the exact same in the States, but I think from what I can gather, it is. Well, he deregistered his car, and he sent off the letters like you did. He notified him, and he has been travelling. And the same with the insurance. He uses a bond that he's able to get this bond, and that's his insurance. But my only, like, I know there's people, it's exactly what you said about the driving license and everything. But with the trickery that goes on and just trying to navigate, even if an accident happens and there's a car crash, insurance companies, they'll take your money left, right and centre, and they'll do their best to not pay out. Is it possible because of not having an up-to-date driving license, even though what you've said, I know in common law that it's just but could that go against you in a claim when you're supposed to get insurance to cover the crash?
I have no idea because, see, I have insurance. I have a driver's license. I just don't register my car. I see no sense in the first thing that the police officer wants is my driver's license. If I don't have a driver's license, I'm going to cause more problems. I don't mind having a driver's license. I know people who say, well, if you have a driver's license, then you agreed to be into their jurisdiction. No, that's not true. I can have a driver's license as long as I specify to them who I am. As you said earlier, I'm not that guy with all capital letters. I'm lowercase, uppercase. When I go in to make my pretrial motion, that's one of the things I bring up. Why are you calling me this straw man? I'm not that person. I'm a people. Person is one of your words. I'm a people. It's all words. And it's what they call fiction, legal fiction. The words are critically important. And I think they highly respect the people who come in and have a knowledge of the law. A lot of judges know less than you and I do on certain aspects of the law. I had a judge who was she was running to be a judge, and I waited till most everybody was gone, and I said, could you tell me what the 7th Amendment to the Constitution is? Oh, he said, oh, this is very embarrassing. I don't know what the 7th Amendment is. I said, Amy, that's the amendment that gives me a right to have a jury trial in your courtroom. Now she was really embarrassed. But it even goes farther. It says in the 7th Amendment that no fact shall be adjudicated but by the rules of common law. Oh, wow. I didn't really appreciate that until maybe the last couple of years. The rules of common law. What are the rules of common law? Well, many of them are in the Bill of Rights, our Bill of Rights in the state, but not all of them. One of the key rules of common law is that we have a right not only to judge the facts of a case, but also the law itself. And if the law itself is wrong, we should be giving not guilty verdicts across the country. And that's what happened. The United States in 1850 passed the fugitive slave law, that if a slave ran away in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania and he was apprehended and an American citizen was guilty of helping the slave escape to Canada, they could be hauled into court for a felony. Wasn't very long before Pennsylvania and Wisconsin juries, they said, no, the law is immoral, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. They couldn't enforce the law in many jurisdictions because people understood the rights of Americans to judge not only the facts in the case, but also the law. So what we call jury nullification is one of the rules of common law. And we have to educate our judges to the rules because they went through law school like Amy. Amy is, she's a assistant deputy attorney, district attorney, and she didn't know what the 7th Amendment was. That's because we, the people, haven't required her to know. I've been in court so many times, and usually I'm one of the last people to go because maybe I've done something or said something that they think might be a problem, so they want to leave me to the end. That's one of the ways they get you. There'll be 30 cases, and you get to be the last one.
They done that to me.
Yeah. My son went in one time, And he played the same game that I was doing, not with the affidavit, but with asking the judge certain questions. And he held the court up for 20 minutes. And when we left, I could see so many of the people in the courtroom were angry because they just wanted to get their case over with, and my son held the courtroom up for 20 minutes. Most people, they go into the courtroom and they argue silly things, and they end up with the judge saying, "Do you have anything more to add?" No. Well, it's a traffic court. You're guilty. Most Americans are sheep. They just go in to get sheared, and they don't like people like me who cause problems because they just want to get in and out. They just want to get in and out. We, the people, have done a very, very, very poor job of educating our government officials. When I go to see a government official, I went to see my assemblywoman, I went to see my state senator. The first thing I asked them is, according to the Declaration of Independence, what is the purpose of government? And invariably, it's always the same thing. They'll come back with, to protect the people. I said, well, that's not, I'm sure you're aware of these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are. They never know. Well, the very next words are that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That's your job. You go up to Sacramento or Washington, D.C., your job is to secure our rights, not to trample on our rights. So our job is to make sure that they don't do a bad job. So when my assemblywoman 6 months later was sponsoring a bill that would make my pastor a felon, we hit her with affidavit. We called her out. You're trampling on the rights of an individual to practice their right to free speech. The fact that it's a pastor and not me personally doesn't matter. You're going outside your proper description of your job. And we're very thankful that the law was withdrawn. It was all ready to go, and then for some strange reason, they pulled it. They never tell you why you win. I'd like to know why, but I'll settle for the win. And I've got 5 now. And it's a very uplifting experience, but I've learned that if you're going to go after bigger fish, you need more fish. That's why every Thursday night I hold a class and people can come on and we'll go through the affidavit that we're working on regarding the Attorney General. And when we get 30 people, then we'll file a claim in Small Claims Court and we'll see what happens. I think we're going to make our Attorney General back down. That's the game. And we learn by playing the game. We lose by not playing.
Excellent. So is there any book that you recommend just on the common, like even though it's common sense you're saying, is there any book that you've read? Because with all this that I've kind of looked at, the sovereignty, the UCC, the whole lot, I've read 20 books and I've got some good stuff eventually, but a lot of people, they get bombarded. Is there a need to be reading book, or is there anything that you would recommend that would help people understand and protect themselves better?
I wish I had the book with me. I don't have it right in front of me. That's a good question. I'll make sure I will.
So afterwards, what you can do is you can actually send it to me and I'll make sure I put it in the show notes, the link to the book, so that people would be aware of that.
I think it's a very, very, very good book, and it's on the common law. I'm sure you've got the same kind of thing, but I really like how concise this is. Okay?
Okay.
I do want to mention that I do have a gift for your listeners, and that basically I want to give them a template for the affidavit process. It kind of spells out, well, what is that initial paragraph and that final paragraph? The body, well, it depends on the situation. And people can get in touch with me if they need help with the construction, especially if it's traffic in the United States, because the traffic issues are pretty consistent across all 50 states. But that's going to be, we're going to have that, the affidavitsecrets.com/awakening. And they go there, they give us their telephone number, and we'll then have the template sent to them. So that's my gift to all the listeners. And thank you so very much for having the opportunity to address the listeners. And the ones that are in the States, I really want to say to them, there's also an organization that you need to be fully aware of called Tactical Civics, tacticalcivics.com. I recognize that the affidavit process is a wonderful strategy for defense, and we can use it to pull some of these people into court and teach them the law respectfully. But the real game plan long term is what Tactical Civics has been working on for, better than, I think, over 10 years, in putting together by each county a people's grand jury and a people's militia, by getting ordinances passed in each county. So the idea of militia being a bunch of guys out in the woods practicing, no. They're going to be under the jurisdiction of the sheriff, and the sheriff is going to be answerable to the people's grand jury. The way it was in 1840, the way it needs to be again. And it's only happened by educating a small percentage of the American people. Because I'm afraid, just like during the Revolutionary War, when the great majority of the Americans either sat out the war or actually actively participated in helping the British, a very small percentage of the American people were willing to sacrifice everything. When Washington's troops were at Valley Forge freezing, other Americans were selling crops to the British, who were hunkered down in Philadelphia, quartered in American homes. I've never expected the majority of Americans to do much of anything. It'll always be a small, hardcore group of patriots that understand. Goth, I think his name is Goth or Goth, said, they who are most enslaved are those who think they're actually free when they're not. Americans think they're free. They're really not. They just happen to be more wealthy than the average person in Nigeria. So they think they're free. But as a friend of mine said, we're all for the cops until the cops come after us. Once you've had the state come after you, like Rudy Giuliani and President Trump have experienced, you recognize you're not free. And the only way that's ever going to change is if a small percentage of Americans get on board and learn the law and then force government back inside its box. Frederic Bastiat said in his great classic book, The Law, if the law can be kept to its proper boundaries, it makes no difference who's elected. It's we, the people's responsibility to define what the box is, because the box is the Constitution. And then we keep those people inside it. And it can be done. Roy, Coughlin, I'm telling you, it can be done.
Excellent. And just finally, because this is one that's kind of annoys me a lot with, they're spraying chemicals. And I mean, I have it from Freedom of Information, I know from Pat. It's usually, do you go for the mayor in situations like that? Because like they're putting toxins in the air, which is making people sick and everything. And I know there'll be a lot of people who don't believe in this and everything, but I know from information, from patents and everything, this is happening. So when you have a situation like that, do we go for the government? Do we go for the mayor of the city? Who do we do the affidavit for to try to get this to be stopped? Because I know in Tennessee they done it. I don't know how they done it. I'm trying to figure that out. But how would we actually stop that in each person's region?
I don't know how Tennessee did it, but I know, for instance, we have a county, Shasta County, up here in California. They gave one whole day to people coming in and giving presentation. So much information was presented to them from airline pilots, hydrologists, people who sampled the soil. So much evidence was piled up that the supervisors had no recourse but to take action. What I always say is, I want to find out who's responsible. What person is responsible for that, the chemicals in the air? That's the person we want to go after. Well, that's a little difficult because I don't know where that plane came from. But we'll have laws passed in California. Wait a minute. You're complaining about the law. Tell me who sponsored the bill. Well, I don't know. That's the problem. That person who sponsored the bill, we need to go after him or her, because once we go after him or her, she's not going to do that anymore. My assemblywoman doesn't do what she used to do because we went after her. She didn't like getting all these affidavits that she had to sign for each one of them. She decided just to back off. She didn't even sponsor resolutions in that critical area that we went after her. This is how you stop it. That's what the affidavit process can do. It's like you're plugging holes in the dam. The long-range goal is to deal with putting up a much better dam. That's tactical civics. But in the meantime, we can do some pretty good job just going after the individuals that are giving us problems. I want to know who gave the law, who sponsored it, and then we go after.
Excellent. Listen, Kirk, thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And to be honest, in a few months' time, I'd like to get you back again and go more in detail, because even if we have a success story, it can be replicated around the world. And I think that's how we make change. Because I know you think, like, this is the States, but I know from Ireland and UK and even a lot of them kind of work under common law. And I've even heard that even despite civil law and all that stuff, it still is common law that you can use. So I think this is an international thing. It's not just the States. So when we've got success stories, we share it with people, we hold them by the hand, we tell them what to do, making sure that their documentation is right, that they register the post, that they keep their ducks lined up, and that way we'll take down all the bad boys. We get the right people in, and then we have a beautiful world, which we know is possible.
Absolutely. Well said. Hopefully by the next time I get on there, we'll have the affidavit that went to the judges. Because the judges don't know the law. They know the statutory jurisdiction. They don't know the common law. And it's our job to respectfully train them so that they can do a much, much better job.
Listen, thank you very much. You might just mention the website again so that people can actually get the free gift that you said, and if there's anywhere else that you want them to find you.
That's just affidavitsecrets.com/awakening, so that we know that they came from you. Okay?
Okay, perfect. And yeah, sure, I'll stay in contact. I'll make sure I put the links, both the audio and the video. But thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Love what you're doing. It gives me hope when I see this. So until I see you again, thanks very much.
Good to know that you're out there. Keep up the good work, Roy.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's all for the Awakening Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on awakeningpodcast.org. Be sure to comment. Let us know what you thought about what we discussed in all this. As long as it's not abusive, it stays up. Until next week, take care. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you'll find my 6 podcasts on bio.link/podcaster. And also, if you'd like to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, you'll find the information on that or on the QR code that's there. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends because it really helps. And also, I'd like to thank DanielPackard.com, helping people with fear, doubt, and anxiety. He's got a 90% success rate, and he's only charging if he helps you. So be sure to check him out, and you get a free call to discuss everything. Until next week, take care.